Touch the leg. Welcome to Tibet This Week, a weekly news edition on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's have a look at today's headlines. Sikyong Penpa Tsering Continues official visit to UK, Scotland, Norway and Denmark. Deputies Salvador, Caro, Cabrera and Inés protest in favor of Tibet at Congress of Mexico. Central Council of Tibetan Medicine condemns media defamation of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Tibet supporters Madhu Limaye's birth centenary celebration and Dr. Nirmala Deshpande's memorial program held in New Delhi. Continue his official tour of countries in Europe, Sikyong Penpa Tsering of the Central Tibetan Administration took part in a webinar titled 72 Years of Chinese Colonial Rule in Tibet, organized by the Democracy Forum shortly after his arrival in the UK on 24th April. Sikyong was among the panel of experts speaking about the Tibetan people and their struggle for freedom from oppressive Chinese rule.
I want to repeat what Lord Charles Bruce mentioned about the book 1984. So what we see in Tibet and in China is the George Orwell's book turning into reality inside, where the state controls everything, every movement. So the Chinese government uses all kinds of artificial intelligence, whether it be electronic identification, whether it be geolocation, or these days now DNA sample collection or iris scanning of Tibetan people. All these are aimed at control, and more control, whether it's the Tibetans or Uyghurs or the Mongols or Hong Kongers or even the Chinese people. But we suffer more.
As part of his final leg of engagements in Scotland, Sikyong Penpa Tsering met with Honourable Councillor David Cameron, Lord Provost of Aberdeen City at the City Chambers and members of the local Tibetan support groups on Friday last week. Sikyong concluded his official visit to Scotland following his address at the University of Aberdeen, where he spoke on Tibet's past and future to an audience of 103 students and staff in the King's College Conference Centre Auditorium at the event hosted by Dr. Martin A. Mills. Prior to his departure to the city of Aberdeen, Sikyong sat for an interview with the news editor of Financial Times, Asia News, Mio Dickey. During his final engagements in London, Sikyong interacted with Tibetan youth in and around London on Saturday last week. Over an hour-long interaction, Sikyong spoke on the historically independent status of Tibet, its rich cultural heritage, ecological significance and prevailing situation. He further spoke on the role of the younger generation of Tibet in taking over the baton of Tibetan struggle. In the evening, Sikyong addressed the Tibetan community. Among the guests present were Kasur Kesan Yangi Takla and former Representative Tsering Tashi. Before embarking on the Norway visit, Sikyong visited the Viken London School of Tibetan Language and Culture and interacted with the students and staff there on Sunday last week. Sikyong Penpa Tsering, during his second leg of his Europe tour in Norway, was hosted at the Norwegian Parliament, where he met and engaged with the Norwegian parliamentarians from different political parties. In his meeting with the Norwegian Green Party parliamentarian Rasmus Hansson, member of the Standing Committee on the Business and Industry, member of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and Defence, and Liberal Party, Parliamentarian Ola Alvestuen, member of the Standing Committee of the Energy and Environment, Sikyong apprised the parliamentarians of the current situation inside Tibet, including the ongoing implementation of state-run colonial boarding schools. In the evening, Sikyong attended the reception hosted by the Tibetan community in Norway on Monday this week. Sikyong Penpa Tsering arrived in Copenhagen, Denmark on Tuesday this week, marking his first official visit to the country. Sikyong was received by Temba Gyurme, president of the Tibetan community in Denmark, Anders H. Andersen, chair of the Tibetan Support Committee Denmark, Greta Sorvik, chair of the Danish Tibetan Cultural Society, Tina and Claudia of Denmark Students for Free Tibet, as well as the members of Tibetan community in Denmark. In the evening, he interacted with the Tibetan youth on the 16 Kashaks' ongoing efforts toward bolstering and political support and engagement on the Tibetan cause based on the prevailing situation inside Tibet and garnering economic support for development programs of the Central Tibetan Administration. The community, though small, can become a powerful force, Sikyong said as he encouraged the youth to continue to take active roles in their community. Following his meeting with the youth, Sikyong addressed the Tibetan community in Denmark on a wide range of issues, including efforts to gain greater support for the middle way policy through renewed political engagement with the governments and parliamentarians based on Tibetan's historical independence. On Wednesday this week, Sikyong began his official engagement at the Danish Parliament in Christiansborg Castle, Copenhagen, with a meeting with the leader of the Danish People's Party, members of the Parliament, Morten Messerschmidt. Sikyong was accompanied by Representative Sonam Farsi and Secretary Loche of Office of Tibet, London, President of Tibetan Community of Denmark, Tempa Gurme, Anders Homak Andersen, and Han Maes Bolsberg from Tibet Support Committee, Denmark. On Wednesday last week, during an ordinary session of the Mexican Congress, Deputy Salvador Caro Cabrera and Deputy Inés Parra rose from their seats and displayed the Tibetan national flag for about 20 minutes at a time as they shouted, "Free Tibet."
Le damos la más cordial bienvenida a este recinto. Le deseamos mucho éxito en su nueva gestión, en su responsabilidad como embajador de China en México. Y nos da mucho gusto recibirlo aquí como embajador de la República Popular de China. Adelante.
Free Uyghurs! No concentration camps!
Bienvenido, señor.
No concentration camps! Liberen los uigures, cancelen los campos de concentración.
The action was given in response to the presence in the parliamentary area of the new ambassador of China in Mexico. The two Protestant deputies are founding members of the group of legislatures and Friends of Tibet in Mexico, which is made up of 19 legislators belonging to 5 political parties, which was started in last November. Several of these legislators traveled to Dharamshala in March this year, headquarters of the Central Tibetan Administration, to participate in the commemoration of the 64th anniversary of the National Uprising Day to show their solidarity demonstrations in favor of the Tibetan cause and the future of reincarnation of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The Central Council of Tibetan Medicine, with 598 registered Sowa Rigpa medical practitioners from 22 different countries, condemned the recent false media reports and defamation against His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama in its statement issued on Friday last week. The statement reads, "Tailored video of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama misused by Chinese communist agents and some irresponsible media to malign the image of the Nobel laureate His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama has hurt sentiments of the entire Buddhist communities and follower of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to a great extent. Media must apologize to His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama and his followers." The birth centenary celebration of the Madhu Limaye, one of the well-known socialist icons, an outstanding parliamentarian and a friend of Tibet, was held in New Delhi on Sunday last week. The celebration program was attended by a host of leaders from different political parties, eminent public intellectuals, socialist activists, friends of Madhu Limaye, and Tibetan representatives from India-Tibet Coordination Office and Samyeling Tibetan settlement of Majnukatila and Bodh Vihar were also present at the celebration. On the same day, the 15th Memorial Day program of Padma Vibhushan Dr. Nirmala Deshpande, a noted social activist, a former parliamentarian and an ardent Tibet supporter, was observed at MP Club in New Delhi. On this occasion, 7 pioneer women from field of social work, education, culture and health were felicitated with Dr. Nirmala Deshpande Smriti Nari Samman 2023. Among them was Kalyan Domageri of the Department of Security of Central Tibetan Administration. Madhu Limaye was a follower of Ram Manohar Lohai and a fellow traveler of George Fernandez, who was a friend of Tibet and an ardent Tibet supporter. That is all for this week's news edition on Tibet This Week. Thank you for watching Tibet TV.